Hi everyone, this is Simran, and welcome to another episode of The Unsaid. Today's episode is really close to my heart because the guest is someone who I reached out to when I wasn't doing my best. She's a counselor, Mrs. Nandini Raman. And beyond her profession, she's one of the most genuine and grounded people I have met. And what I admire the most about her is the calm she carries while also holding space for others' emotions. Today, I want to have a real conversation with her, not just about therapy, but about what it means to be human, to feel deeply, and also to heal in today's times.
Thank you so much, Simran. Thank you so much for having me. I am just overwhelmed at just the onset of the session. Thank you for thinking of me and inviting me. And I'm so super proud to just look at you. Look at you. I think it's so joyful for me to see you do this. And from where we started
Yeah.
to what you have accomplished. And I'm sure this is just the beginning of many, many, many bigger
Thank
things
you.
your way. So, yeah, absolutely thrilled to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure for me to have you here because I came to you at a times when I was struggling.
Yeah.
And I've actually always wondered, how do you keep so calm and composed while also having such a big space for others' emotions? Does it come naturally to you?
So I have a smile when you say calm and composed because I think that's the persona that the clients watch. That's a question you should ask my family and especially my children. You know how calm and composed their mom is. I think yeah, you get a little better with age. But answering your question specifically, I think. I have always been an empath, and I think even when I was like really, really young and where we didn't know the sea of counseling, even as a profession, there were people who would come talk to me and, just find some kind of solace. So I think for me, it was just something that I think I was just born with. And, I'd like to, attribute that to my dad. He was somebody who was very kind and, compassionate and composed and generous and all of that. So I think that part of him is something that I have inherited. So yeah,
That's so lovely to know.
yeah.
But how did this happen to you? Was this a calling for you, or were you curious, or did something personal happen to you that led you to, wanting to be a psychologist?
I think today, in hindsight, I can say it's absolutely my purpose of this lifetime, right? But I did actually fall on it very accidentally. So I have a marketing background where I was heading media and marketing for two major music labels back in Bombay. Sony Music, when Sony Music actually stepped foot in the country, and then Universal Music that took, erstwhile BMG. So I was doing my thing in Bombay, and my husband is a musician, and he was working extensively with Rahman. So we moved to Chennai in December of 2005 to just check out Chennai. And like they say, rest is history. And we've been here. My son was born in Chennai. Our daughter was born, of course, in Bombay. She was a year and a half when we moved here. And then it's almost like, God's way, where I was sitting at home one fine day and I opened the Hindu and I said, I need to do something, because I can't go back to a corporate job because the babies are too tiny. And there was this, University of Madras, MSc, and, counseling psych and psychology. And I said, okay, great. These are like, great 2 years and let me just enroll into the course. And I did it. And one thing led to the other to the other. And, from there, I met my mentor, Dr. Emma Gonzalez, who used to live in Egmore. So I actually trained under her, interned with her, and then I from there stumbled upon a job at Satyabama University. So just I mean, doors just kept opening, and yeah, then I started my own practice, and it's been great. So I'm just so thankful that I got that shot for a second inning, and I was able to make something of it, because I think our clients teach us so much, and irrespective of whatever you are going through, you magnify it and you say, oh my God, my life is a mess. Till you actually hear somebody else's story and how they show up for themselves. So it, I think, humbles you. It really kind of makes you also appreciate everything that you have and that you don't have, and what you don't have, I believe it's just not time as yet, because when the time is right, it will just appear in front of you.
Right.
Yeah.
You meet so many people in their vulnerable states. So, what has that taught you about human nature?
That it's absolutely normal to be vulnerable, first and foremost. And like I said, we all have good times and some not so good times. But are we able to first and foremost be aware that I'm not feeling okay? Am I able to accept that there is something which is amiss? Rather than just numbing myself under denial or brushing it under the carpet, can I dip into the courage to say, I need to talk to somebody. I need to get the help that I need to get, because a lot of times that timely intervention can just turn your life around.
True.
And that's all that it is about. That yes, people are vulnerable. People go through a lot of, not so good experiences. But to say that, I'm cynical or life is just horrible is untrue. Life is beautiful and people around are also beautiful. You will find your tribe, but really to have the courage to say, I need to be able to face my fears. I need to be committed to doing that inner work. And first and foremost, am I even aware that this is something that needs fixing? And then there are people who will actually help you, guide you, mentor you, counsel you, hold your hand, and take you through the distance. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes it's like you meet clients who have been young students. Like, I think one of my students, he came to me when he was in the ninth grade, and today he's 27 or 28, and he just sent me a message out of the blue. And he's like, Auntie, do you remember me? I'm like, of course I do. What are you doing? And he's like, hi-fi, some big shot lawyer, something, something. And he said, I wouldn't have been here if it was not for you, because he had a learning difficulty. And it was so difficult for him to go to our educational system, fall in line, get the grades, make sure, you're scoring that percentage. And just to be there for them at that time and saying, this too shall pass, just hang in there, do the best that you can. So it's really, really,
Fulfilling.
fulfilling, satisfying, overwhelming. And it's just so beautiful. Like, so many students that I've worked with at MOP have gotten married, have had babies. So sometimes randomly you go somewhere and they're like, oh, look here, this is my husband, this is my daughter. And I'm just like, oh my God, have I grown so old? Because, you just like forget the time that has lapsed. Yeah. So that's.
You've seen millennials and Gen Z up close, and they have such difference in processing pain, I believe. Because millennials were, they thought strength is about not breaking down, while Gen Z is more open to breakdowns and therapy.
Yeah.
So, how do you think each generation is processing their pain?
I think that's a fantastic question. And I think now the Gen Alphas, right? There's so much of normalizing the dictionary, with regard to mental health conditions. And somewhere I believe, like today, we just use it in vain. A lot of times I do believe that, you kind of showcase it just to kind of get a point across, or to be cool, or to be with it, or to get accepted by the peer group and so on. But coming back to the specifics of the millennials versus Gen Zs, especially with pain, I think, yes, we were also taught, as a generation, that talking about your problems is a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
But I think we also have to look at the social fabric that's changed, Simran, where we all came from families which were joint families. So you could have been my mother or my sister, and maybe I have beef with you, but I still had an aunt or an uncle or a cousin that I could go and speak to. Cut to nuclear families, and today people don't even want to have two children.
Yeah.
A child at best, right? And that child is also called as a latch child, where where the key is. You come back from school, you pick up the key, your food is on the kitchen table, you zap it, you eat it. So it's become a lot more lonely. And I think today children are very, very aware that I'm not feeling good, something is amiss. The problem is when that child goes and talks to the parent and tells the parent, I need help, the parent says, talk to me. Why can't you talk to me? I'm your mother, I'm your father. But the entire narrative is that you don't get my problem. And that's why I want to meet a random stranger who is going to be able to understand where I'm coming from. So I think children are definitely a lot more aware, and I think Gen Zs are way more proactive. And I say this with a lot of respect. I remember there was a time, that 15 to 18 is crazy when your children are growing up. I think all my gray hairs are attributed to that. And I would tell my daughter, and my daughter was very difficult when she was growing up, in comparison to my son, who was easier because his personality is like, if I tell him something, he'll listen. He'll still go and do what he wants to do. But my daughter would take me head on. Okay. So that would also like make you angry because I'm the mother, right? So I would tell her so many times that, you know what, I don't think we can communicate. And if this is not something that's going to get resolved, you should go and talk to your school counselor. And she would turn around and tell me, Mama, don't worry about it. I'm already talking to her. And I would think like, oh my God, really? I think so bad, like does she actually need to go and speak to somebody else? And a lot of times, it became a joke at home that, okay, Mama's only going to give us attention if we are her client. Otherwise, she's just a mama. And then they would tell all these students, like, how can you love this woman? You should see her real avatar at home. So when you said, calm and composed, I was just like smiling to myself saying, okay, perceptions, right? But yeah, I think it was difficult for our generation. And I think that's also something that stops people, millennials and also the Gen X's, right? To not get help. Because again, it's like, I cannot be weak. I cannot be vulnerable. I cannot talk about my problems, right? This needs to just stay within the house. Yeah. What are you doing washing dirty linen in public? But again, I think platforms like these, Simran, are so powerful to break that myth. To say that, we all are just but human. And you could have a difficulty. And if you really feel that, you're not able to think straight, speak to a counselor as just somebody who's a professional who'll give you the insight into what is something that's actually got you, wired up. And then figure out, your problem solving, or figure out how can you strengthen your resilience, or what is something that is actually going to help you feel better about yourself. So I think a lot of it is normalizing these conversations, and letting people know help is available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My whole perception about being strong changed after I met you.
Oh, really?
Like, to be honest, till then I was thinking that not breaking down, or breaking down is a sign of weakness, like amongst my own people.
Yeah.
And I also used to think that letting go is also a sign of weakness. Like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't give up on the person
Yeah.
or the relationship or the work
Yeah.
that really means so much to you.
So where do you think that comes from? Why do you think we are so deeply enmeshed in believing that?
At that point, I was thinking that this is how it is and there is no two ways about it. But after that, when I figured that it is actually not so.
Yeah.
Today
And I
I'm
have a
feeling-
choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feeling my feelings today is a stronger thing to do
Yeah.
than to just brush it down and say, no.
Absolutely. And it's so empowering and liberating, right?
Yeah.
To just say that, you know what, I love you, but I don't want to come out today.
Yeah.
And it's got nothing to do with what I feel for you, but
Yeah.
I'm just not having a good day.
Yeah.
But that strength of that open communication between partners or between a parent and child to
Yeah.
really call it out for what it is.
Mm.
But I think a lot of times we are just groomed into believing that this is equal to love
Yeah.
or respect, which
Yeah.
is worse,
Mm.
right? So you could be resentful, but as long as you nod your head and say, yeah, okay, I will listen to you,
Mm.
the parent believes that, oh, my child is really amazing and listens to me, but
Mm.
you don't know what it is that they are doing
Mm.
in their free, unsupervised time.
Yeah.
That is way more harmful,
Yeah.
So I rather they be honest and transparent. And sometimes it's hard for us as adults to kind of process it on our own because we're not used to it. We're not used to listening to those things because we were not raised that way, right? We were, and I say that, to a lot of parents, even today, when my mom is 75, she doesn't even live in the same city. She could be on a call and she'll tell me, do something, either a puja or a ritual or something that needs to get done. And I'll just say, okay, ma, I'll do it, and cut to the mother-in-law saying the same thing. And you will do it because you're still respectful. But, your 13 and your 15-year-olds will look at you and say, but why should I do it?
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. And so is it okay for you to accept that, or are you going to get challenged and threatened that, oh my God, I'm not able to control this child, and so now I need to get down hard on her, So I think a lot, in terms of emotions, a lot in terms of also the way we are so scared about people judging us, like the biggest thing that we were raised with, log kya kahenge,
Yeah.
like, oh my God, what are people going to say? We didn't raise you well, and your dad's name and all of that. No one cares. No
Yeah.
one really cares. And then again, it goes deep down, Simran. I mean, we can have like a day long, chat on this. It goes to patriarchy. It goes, if there's anything good that the child does, it's all about the father. Right. But if the girl, especially the girl child, has too many, relationships, she's messing around, early sexual activity. Oh, look at her mother. Her mother was also chalu, so quick to make a judgment and, actually, be really, mean somewhere. And I think today on Insta, like I was looking there with so many, like today, everybody who has a phone, like we were talking, right, pre-shoot, thinks that I'm an influencer. So there's this girl, Life by Pooja, this Bengali girl in some village somewhere, and her USP is she speaks in English. She's self-taught or she went to school or whatever, but she lives in a village in somewhere in the interiors of West Bengal. And she says that nobody in my family knows, but my husband is very supportive, and she makes these reels.
Okay.
And I was just viewing the comments, and the way people troll, saying, why don't you just do this in Hindi? Look at your English, look at your accent. So the amount of negative energy that people have to troll somebody, to actually diss somebody, to call them, that you are not okay, this is not all right. Why don't you like actually go get a job and do something, productive with your own life? So yeah, there's a lot of hate out there. There's a lot of pulling others down, and yeah, it can become a bit much, especially when you don't have support, and you don't have a support system also. So it's important for us to check in with our children, check in with our partners, is all okay, and just because you don't share your feelings and you numb them is just not okay. It's just not acceptable, right? Yeah.
Culturally, we still hear people say that, I'm not mad to go to the therapist. And it's also seen as when somebody goes to a therapy, it's also considered as that person having lost it in life.
Yeah.
But I see it as something that you could do to just stay well, even when you're absolutely happy in life. So, why do you think this feeling persists, and why do people still look at it in this light?
Stigma. I think stigma is so huge, right? Like I said, I think counseling as a profession is pretty nascent, right? Maybe the last 2.5 decades, like, 25, 30 years, this concept has actually, started booming. But before that, like I said, you had families, you had people that you could go to, like your grandparent or your aunt or your uncle or somebody
So
who
that
you
was
could
normal
trust.
when you speak to your relatives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you go and seek professional help, the first thing is, why should the stories of the house go out? Or what is something that, if it is between a couple
That we can't
that
solve.
we can't solve, right? Or if it's between a parent and child, tell me, why are you going and trusting some third person, right? And then also this whole thing that, people will come to know that, oh my God, she's in therapy, or she's on meds, or she sees the psychiatrist, I have had a friend when I used to work alongside a psychiatrist in Chennai, who looked at me and just looked away. And I just turned around because it's absolutely okay for her not to want to recognize me because she was at the psychiatrist's office, you know.
Okay.
But I was just thinking, like, but dude, I know you and we go back a long way, you know. So, what is so difficult for you? But it is difficult for people to still come to terms with the fact that, yes, I could have a mental health problem or a diagnosis or an illness or a condition, you know. And I think a lot has to do with education, like where we need to normalize these conversations. We really need to educate people that depression and anxiety are clinical terms. You know, small kids, you wouldn't believe it, Simran. When the schools reopened, there was a training program I was doing, and then little fellows, okay, 3.5, 4. I'm so stressed, you know, one little kid. And I'm like, what are you stressed about? He doesn't know what it means, but he knows it's a word.
Term, huh?
If I tell her, she'll do something about it.
Mhm.
And then he just started crying. So, of course, he had separation anxiety. He'd, you know, just joined school
Okay.
and he was crying for the mother. And he came and he said, oh, I'm very stressed. So I said, okay. And I go back to the office, call the mother. He knew that I just need to put this magic word and something is going to happen. The same way a lot of teenagers say, I'm depressed. You know, I'm just going to kill myself. You know, so they use it in vain. But of course, for us in the helping profession, all of this is very, very serious, right? Young kids who are engaging in self harm, young kids who are actually, you know, ideating suicide is just so unhealthy. So, the bigger question is, what have we done as a society and how bad have we gone? Because when I started at about, you know, 18, 19 years ago, a typical client would be about 35, 40, and we'd say, okay, midlife crisis. But today you have young ones at 12 and 13 whose business is just to play or study, right? There's nothing else that you're expected at 12 and 13 to do, who are actually being diagnosed for clinical anxiety, for clinical depression, self harm. Sexuality is just all over the place. I am, you know, binary, I'm non binary, I am a book, I'm a cat, I am, you know, all over the place. And sometimes I really have to ask them, what is that experience for you? Because there's been zero, you know, sexual activity or zero exposure
But
to.
where is all this coming from?
I think it's all just out there in the media, right? It's on Insta, it is on your, you know, socials. There is so much of misinformation than actual information. So even when we do sex ed in schools, you know, and when you talk to them about masturbation, some people are like, oh, why are you talking about all of this? They'll start thinking about it, you know. But the point is, you at least give them, you know, facts of what it is to grow up. It is very normal and natural, right? But if you're not going to normalize these so called difficult conversations, it becomes really hard for them to transit. And for the girls, we have a lot of rituals, right? Coming of age, some, you know, cultures will have a puja, or she's dressed up and made to sit, and everybody is announced that, okay, this girl is now ready. But what happens to the boys? How do they, you know, deal with their hormonal changes? They don't know, but they're also going through puberty. So to actually have and I'm not expecting parents to have this conversation, right? Because yeah, it is sometimes difficult in, you know, conservative traditional homes, but there are people who do this, you know. But for parents to have the courage to say that I need to give the child the right amount of education, you know, no less and no more. But we are so scared that, oh my God, they're going to ask me all about sex. They're not interested. They don't want to know. You know, it's that little bit of curiosity. And if you give them age appropriate answers, they are enough and they're satiated with it. Like little kids, you know, when I say little, like 12, 13, 14-year olds have not had any sexual experience to say, you know, I think I am gay, I think I'm a lesbian, I think I'm, you know, bi. But you have not had one genuine relationship. So, where is all of this coming from? Is it just the peer pressure to fit in? Or is it just about, you know, being cool? I don't know. You know, so sometimes that's what I was saying. Like sometimes it's on the other end of the spectrum where it is just completely heightened, you know. So I don't know if it's for attention seeking or to like just belong to the group. And it's hard.
It's quite alarming, but these things.
It's really, it is. Yeah. And I think as normal people, we don't hear of it often because, it's not spoken about. But I think this is what we live and breathe in our profession, right? Because this is what comes into work almost every day. And yeah, so sometimes it's very, very disturbing, and the other disturbing thing is also when marriages don't work, and then there are little children caught in the crossfire and made to choose, if there's a custody battle or if there's a nasty divorce, don't tell the child, enough information. I had a client who lost his father. He was just in the ninth. He lost his father by suicide. Okay. And never spoken about it. Right. So he kept telling me that my father is living in another country. So every holiday season that I would see him, I'd say, "Oh, so are you going to visit your father? Is your father coming down? Is your father?" Till the mother actually came and she said, I think it's time I told you that, he lost his father and the father killed himself. And I said, when were you planning to tell me that? It's like such an important part of information.
The child believes that he's alive and he's going to come.
No, he's in denial. He does not want to tell even the therapist because the therapist will say, what happened?
Okay.
What actually drove. So again, stigma around, what is something that happened. So it's very hard sometimes, and I just feel like all this help has to be normalized. Like you have school counselors, but not just for a chapa that you're a CBSE school, you must have a school counselor. You need to have a counselor who's genuinely interested in these stories, who's actually there to motivate and encourage these children to do well for themselves, not just academic, but also emotionally and behaviorally. That is our role, right? And in colleges, it's the same thing. But in college, you're also experimenting, sex, drugs, rock and roll. There is all of that. So there is a lot of experimentation. And at workplace today, we have like a lot of companies that have employee assistance program where you actually can sign into a service and, get timely help. But again, to get them to use it, and also tell the family that there is this service that we don't need to actually suffer in silence. We need to be able to actually, get timely help and intervention. It takes so long sometimes, and then they hit rock bottom and the damage is already done. So what people don't understand is all these illnesses are umbrella terms, Simran. Like if I say I'm depressed, right? I could be very mildly depressed and I can still do this interview. I can be moderately depressed and I can break down and say, okay, now I can't do this. Let's take a break. Let's have chai and all of that. Or I can be severely depressed that, you keep calling and I keep fixing, but I don't show up. Right? So it's very important to understand where exactly is your client at. And for that, there has to be trust, there has to be transparency, there has to be a relationship and a rapport, and it is all doable and possible. And that's the work essentially that we do. And which is why I feel it's so powerful because you're actually touching lives, so yeah, very fulfilling. Yeah.
So as we were speaking about, emotional education to be a real thing in schools and colleges, so that was my next question. How do you think people can actually make it accessible for students, especially to tell them that it's they need to learn to feel their feelings and be open to expressing it also.
Yeah.
Just like how math and social is important.
Absolutely. I think we as a culture don't talk in terms of feelings or emotions, right? So it's like when the children are really tiny, can you actually get them to express their emotions, right? And of course, the vocabulary will also grow as they grow, but the basic four fears are mad, glad, sad, and fear. Right? So am I really, really mad? Am I really sad? Am I really happy? Or am I really fearful? And depending on that, they will actually pick their narrative. So you'd be actually surprised. Some of the fancy schools, I'll not take names, but some of the fancy schools where I've done some work, children in 9th and 10th grades they are at another level, Simran. I mean, they're so aware. I actually gave them, a case study of a client and said, this is what's going on and what do you think? And they were talking about he should do some meditation, he should get into self reflection, introspect, write a journal, all the right answers. And I'm just like, what happened to you? I thought you were like 14 and 15-year-old babies, right? But they are so aware, so I think it's also the exposure.
Yeah.
How do you use that exposure? How do you use everything which is made available for you, right?
Yeah.
And somewhere for us to also encourage them that it's okay, failure is absolutely a stepping stone for success.
Yeah.
But I think today's parenting is a little skewed, where you just want to foolproof everything. My child should never fall down, my child should never get hurt, every door he knocks on should open with a pot of gold. It does not happen in real life.
Yeah.
So what happens to this child when this child actually is at the crossroads of his work life? Is just completely destroyed because you have not prepared him to actually take no for an answer, to fail, to know that it's okay, just dust yourself and try harder.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we always used to laugh about it, right? It's not the first benchers in the class who kind of did exceptional.
Yeah.
It was the last benchers. Why do you think that happened? Because the resilience, right, is so much higher. There's no pressure. I don't want to come first.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely happy being average. But can I still kill it being average? So what are the other life skills that I'm focusing on? What are the other life skills that I actually want to fill my life with? Because that is something that's going to take me far. So we talk about IQ versus EQ. IQ is important, no doubt, but it's not the end all of life.
True.
Your overall success is only with your EQ. Are you able to understand what's happening to you? Are you able to pick what's happening to somebody else? What are your social skills like? Are you empathetic? Are you able to kind of be there for someone in distress? And all of that is absolutely something that really kind of, sifts these children apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think today, with the kind of exposure there is, I think in today's times, it's the most important to have these counselors at schools and colleges.
Yeah. And today, even if you look at, these MBA schools, Simran, a lot of MBA schools actually give credit programs for employees to do courses like mindfulness, emotional intelligence, problem solving, conflict resolution, because it's so needed, right? You're never going to like live life in a silo.
Yeah.
You're always going to be a part of a team.
Yeah.
And there are always going to be difficult people and different people,
Yeah.
So when you're working, sometimes it could be somebody else who's not easy. And how do you still show up? How do you still put your best foot? Someone could micromanage you. And today I hear that, I even as, on the panel of few companies where we actually hire, the Gen Zs don't want to, they just don't want to work extra. They want, their work-life balance is, this is what it is. I was talking to a friend of mine, about my first boss, and we wanted to just kill him together because he was a workaholic and he would slave drive us, but it took me about 5-7 years to realize that, thank you, because you made a professional out of me. But today you ask these kids, they know the money they want, they know the kind of lifestyle they want, but they're not willing to put in the effort. There's almost like a disconnect. It's not about disloyalty, but it's a disconnect that I'm not going to work so much. Bus, I'll just do this much. I want 30,000, 40,000, bus. Enough. Weekend is mine. So I remember interviewing somebody and he says, ma'am, weekend I can't because I have a girlfriend. I have to take her out. I was like, wow, priorities. I'm like, what about your job? He's like, yeah, Monday to Friday I'll come, no? Like he's telling me like, that's enough, you should give me the weekend off. So of course, poor fellow didn't get selected because the role wanted, him to come in on Saturdays. But I was just very beautifully surprised that he had the courage to talk about it, And a lot of times it's about validating what they are feeling. Even in therapy, right? Because at home, when the child says something, you just say, this is nothing. We have walked so many kilometers in our childhood. The child says, so what should I do about it? Fair enough.
Yeah.
Or somebody will say, oh, my trauma, I came, from partition, your grandfather came, and, life was so difficult. He says, why are you like, telling
Yeah.
me all of this? And she's like, look at your problem. You're only talking about, your friend not talking to you. What is the big deal in this? Get a grip on yourself. But the child will say, but ma'am, it's really like a a do or die situation, because if my friend is not talking to me, I just can't go to school, So for him, that's equal to
Yeah.
like a huge problem.
Yeah.
But for the parent, because you have had so much trauma
Yeah.
and carried baggage, which you choose not to resolve, you think it's okay for this child to, just brush it off. So, yeah, it is challenging sometimes. And then to give the parent that perspective becomes really hard.
And
Because
for them to accept of it.
absolutely,
Yeah.
because then we also want to behave like Santa Clauses, right? We want to, sometimes want to control them, but don't want to discipline. And then when you are a little harsh, then you buy them all these expensive gifts that they have not asked for. And that is also a reason why there's so much of gadget addiction today. And these parents come in, Simran, you should see these sessions. They come in with a brand new baby, right?
Okay.
1.5 year old, and very proud. Ma'am, whichever phone, iPhone, this brand, that brand, she knows how to unlock it. And I just smile. I'm like, very good. Because another year down, they'll come back and say, ma'am, without the phone, she's not eating, she's not doing anything. We have to give her the phone. But who gave her the phone in the first place? She did not ask for it, right? You don't have the time and the energy to engage with the child. You give them a gadget, or you switch on the TV and say, chalo, now you watch this and I'll feed you with this bowl and dunk it in your stomach. But they didn't ask for these things. So somewhere it is so many things, subtly that actually impact. And are we really aware? Are we willing to change? Are we willing to better it? So yeah, lots of conversations. Yeah.
Do you ever feel like healing has a finish line? And how do you sometimes make people understand that, not every pain can be healed fully,
Yeah.
and but still life still goes on beautifully.
Yeah.
And what do you think of healing? Like, not in theory, but in real life, what does it mean to you?
It's such a beautiful question, first and foremost. I think we heal till the day we take our last breath, right? For those of us who are conscious of it, and those of us who are actually walking the path. I'll give you an example. I think death, bereavement is really, really harsh, especially if it's a loved one, right? So when I lost my dad, incidentally, today is his star birthday. Yeah, he should have been, I think 89 or 90. I'm not sure, but I think it was so hard, Simran. I think it took me about a year and a half or 2 years to grieve, where it is not normal, right? And there were times where I was like, okay, should I actually see the psychiatrist, because I'm becoming dysfunctional, right? Um, and today, for me to talk about it without tearing up, without breaking down, it is not that I miss him any lesser, right? But I have also healed, and the grief has changed into looking at him as, this beautiful person who really kind of triggered that fire in my belly to be who I am today, right? Of course, it would have been so much more awesome if he was here to see it, in the physical realm, but he is not. But I know that he is still watching over me, right? And that void remains, but life happens around it. You get busy, you have your children, you have, your own things that you want to do. So I'm not saying that the grief has gone away, but it just gets filled with life, and it takes over with everything else that life has to accommodate, right? So for a lot of people, I think healing is about your own self of how do you feel? Are you functional? Do you feel that I'm in control of the situation? I can deal with my emotions. I'm able to articulate it. I am productive. I'm functional. I'm contributing and giving back, and all of those are the markers of mental health. right? And I also believe my competition is only with myself. So sometimes you have clients who will come and say, even before we start, I just want to know your credentials. So I'm just like, okay, these are my credentials. Do you do this therapy? And I'm like, I'm so sorry, I don't do this therapy. Because I don't want to, just engage with you if this does not suit you. But the reason I was sharing that was, yeah, a lot of times it's their expectation, right? Do you fit the bill? And for us to actually tell them, no, I don't, and please find whoever actually works for you, because that is when you will believe your healing is complete, right? It's not about the process for them, it is about the ticks on the checklist, right? But for me, I really believe that it is to each his own. And as long as you feel that, yes, I'm able to smile, I'm able to engage, I'm able to actually, be somebody who's joyful, who's supportive in somebody else's life, I can see the amount of work that I have done and I am a better person. And a lot of times I tell them, that yeah, you would find people who are certified from the US, from the UK, and there are lots of people who have, superb credentials. So it's not just about that. It is also about you actually vibing and matching with your therapist.
That's
You know?
very important.
Absolutely, because you can have all of that, but if I feel that, you're just giving me jargons, but you're not even understanding what my problem is, I have lost the client. So it's very important to actually just make them feel understood, heard, seen. And then I think, they just open up, they become vulnerable. And then for you to again give them the choice, saying, what is something that you want to pick for this session? What is it that you want to work on? So to have action points and work at their pace, not your agenda, you know. But yeah, for me, I really believe healing is, ongoing. It is as long as you can see the journey that you have completed this far with a lot of pride, with a lot of, good feelings. Yeah, it's been a life worth it, and there were some that I didn't win and some that I lost. But you know what? I still feel that it was absolutely a worthwhile journey, because it's not really about the end. It is about everything that happens from you starting to your, very end. And the people you meet, the stories that are a part of your life, the lives that you empowered, all of that, I think it's just so beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
With everything moving so fast around us, social media, comparison, and the constant noise, how do you think it's affecting one's sense of self?
Again, it's a tough one, right? Because to each his own, and no one size fits us all. I think social media is definitely very, very, very powerful, but yet it only showcases real life, not real life.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if people were really actually having such a good time in their life, they would be living it, not just, making all these reels and putting it out there, and actually waiting for the kind of, the views and the likes and the kind of, hey, do you know how many, members I have, and all of that, uh, and I really feel that today a lot of people do it as a knee-jerk reaction, Simran. And that is something I also have a problem with, not just about the trolls, but about people actually, just believing that they are specialists in the field. Even with mental health, you can find so many people who claim that, I know everything, and then they'll give you gyan on narcissism. Oh, this one is BPD, or this one is this. As therapists and counselors, we know it.
Yeah.
Right? But it's still not my business to diagnose anybody.
Yeah.
I can tell you, Simran, you could be indicative of this. But hey, because we've done this paper pencil assessment, I'm going to ask you to meet the psychiatrist, and he's the only one who can sign off on it. But there are people who just, believe that I can, do this, and I'm going to post this reel, and I have like, zillion likes, and now I have arrived. So there's a lot of misinformation, and I feel anyone who can speak well for like, 2 minutes and package a tight reel, believes that they have actually arrived. And I think that is also the reason why the young ones actually get swayed, because there's so much of information, right? And I don't have to listen to something that does not resonate with me. So I'm going to keep waiting and, keep checking content till the time I know that, yeah, this woman kind of speaks my language, or I really like her, but you don't know what is the authenticity of that message and that information. Yeah, exactly. And that sometimes can be difficult. And in addition to that, I think for young people, we have no controls whatsoever. I have had clients who have actually had abuse, who have had a runaway, who, and of course, then the guy was found and he was arrested under the POXO Act because he was a minor. He had taken this girl away. So all kinds of rubbish that happens, because children are also very smart. They have one ID that they give to the parents, and then they have four other IDs where they are actually, mixing and matching different genders and like figuring out, their own life. So there's so much, there is an unofficial account, there's an official account. And I'm just like, if all this intelligence you use in your academics, you'd be like, topping IIT. So yeah, but there is that much, out there for them to explore, to kind of figure out. And sometimes it's really playing with fire. I would also like to believe where I would really chew my kids' brains, and say, tell me what's going on, because this is what I would see at work, right? So I was always accused that, you are just projecting all your fears on us and da 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 da. And I finally arrived at that, maybe I know 80% of what happens in their life, but there was a fat chunk of 20% which I was really not aware of. But to tell them that good, bad, ugly, I need to be the first one to know what's happening. Because if I know it from you, I will do everything in my power to help you. But if I hear it from a third person, God bless you, because I need to know what's going on. So I remember, it was more of me taking these kids out to actually have a conversation with them. And they actually turned around and said, Ma, you need to chill now. You just please work. You do whatever you do in the clinic. We are there for each other. We've got each other's back, and I just suddenly felt like, oh God, like they've like ripped me off my role as a mother because they've grown up. But it was also very endearing to see that, that's why you have siblings, right? Because they can at least, look after each other. And they say, if we are not able to resolve it, then we will bring it to you. But 99%, we can kind of figure it out. So I was like, okay, good luck. Yeah.
Do you think we are becoming more emotionally intelligent as a generation, or are we just becoming more familiar with the terms used around mental health while actually not understanding it?
I would like to believe it's the latter. I think we use a lot of these terms, jargons. There is, of course, a new dictionary. And especially when the Gen Alphas come in, I have a separate book. I kid you not, to write it down. And I say, okay, now what does this mean? Because they are going to say, don't go to her. She's an old auntie. She doesn't know any of these things, So I need to also stay with it, right? But it is, I think a lot of it is, again, used in vain. It's used to be cool. It's used to be like, I am right here, right now. But I don't genuinely believe that we are actually emotionally there. Because if we were really there, it would be reflective of the society that you and I are a part of, And especially with that age decreasing, like I said, for clinical diagnosis, that would be reflective. So if you look at how children, like babies, are raised, right, in a lot of these Scandinavian countries, or even Japan for that matter, till 6 years, they don't care. If I can make a sleeping line or a standing line and a smiley face. And the other day, a parent is saying, Madam, he's 3 years old, he can't write. I said, it's fine. I started writing when I was 6 years old and I turned out fine, right? Your child is only 3. No, madam, he has to be prepared for his interview. And I was like, can you just stop, stressing out the child and spilling your anxiety on the child? Let him just go and play in mud and roll, or climb trees. But it does not happen because the parents are also so anxious, right? Because school admission nahi milega. And, then it's like the whole bucket of reasons. But I think it's also about figuring out are we really emotionally sensitive to what the narrative is? What is someone saying? Do we have the empathy, compassion to take a minute and understand what are you going through? Nobody cares, right? So many companies, and I'm sorry to say, Simran, so many entertainment companies, that I have approached for employee assistance program that I run on my own, and they just say, honestly, Nandini, this is great initiative, but you know what? There's no scope for this. We don't care if he's and these are like camera guys, these are directors, these are editors who have crazy lives, right?
Yeah.
Musicians, I don't care. When he is at work, he needs to deliver. Whatever is happening in his personal life is his problem. I don't have the mind space for that. And I just feel like, how insensitive are you as a human being? Forget his boss, you know? Because with the boss comes, the money exchange and all of that. But at a human level, if he's telling you he's going through something or addiction, Simran, again, it's a huge pool, It's so hard to come out of an addiction, right? So I think stories and narratives like that make it very, very hard. So I definitely don't believe we are there emotionally. But I think a lot of times there's a lot of pretense that, of course, I get it, and then you shut the door and you say, I don't really care, So can we be authentic about, just really, and I'm not saying so go the whole hog, but when you are in that, close quarter exchange, can you actually really understand what that person is going through? And I'm not asking you to be their therapist, but just to take that moment to at least explore what they're feeling. Today, even if I say, hey, how are you? I don't even wait to hear what you have to say, and then you're like, oh, I'm having a bad day, but I've already crossed and gone, So, do we even have that patience and respect to actually process if someone says, you know what, I'm not okay? Oh, it's okay. Don't worry. Seriado, Naliki will be another day, right? So that's not the point. The point is really about, like, are you interested in these stories? Otherwise, don't ask and don't pretend that, like, you really care for the person. That inconsistency is a problem. You have to be able to walk your talk, you have to be able to show up, and you have to lead by example. Absolutely. Yeah.
So when your life gets really chaotic and noisy,
Yeah.
Is it harder or easier as a psychologist?
I think this is a fantastic question, and I want to clear it. And I think this is the first reel I'm going to show my family. Um, Everybody needs to understand that me being a therapist is a job. Right? But what happens is, when it comes to family, they expect you to be a therapist all the time. So if you have an altercation with your husband, which every couple has, I cannot be the therapist at that time. I'm the wife, right? So if my daughter says she wants to, do something crazy at 21, I am the mother, right? And I can be seeing clients who are 18 and 17 and 15, and I can be very empathetic to them, but to her, I'm her mother. Right? And the same for my son, and so on and so forth. So I think this is a trick question, but to answer that, I think for me, I just take time off, right? I think I sleep, I strength train, I travel, and all of that kind of just sets my equilibrium. Because more than actually issues with the family or anything else, I think the burnout for us is real, because we are listening to real time stories at work, right?
Yeah.
And every story is challenging. Everybody is going through so much, so on a day, I think even if you can do like 5 sessions, that's great. After that, you are just done. Don't have the bandwidth, because each of your session is at least 45 minutes to an hour, and sometimes they just want to talk more, so it can become very exhaustive for you to also process. And if you are not getting a break to kind of rejuvenate and reboot, you are going to burn out. And a lot of times, a lot of people take that residual energy back home. But there are times, Simran, and I'm absolutely honest about it, when I go back home, I don't want to even talk to anybody in the house, and I'm just like, just leave me alone, just shut the door. Probably even Netflixing is a challenge, because your brains are just fried, and you just don't want to talk to anyone. Then you take a day, and figure it out. So it is important for us to also know that it is a job. You can be very good at a job, and you could be having issues from various roles that you play. And also to tell everybody, even the counselor goes for counseling to senior counselors and to senior supervisors. Just because you do a job and if you're good at it does not mean that you are void of any problems and issues or challenges, right? You are just as human as somebody else. So to have that vulnerability to say, you know what, maybe this aspect is okay, but the problem is coming from the finances, or it's coming from, the children, or from the in-laws, or from whatever, right? In some other issue. So yeah, still to just, I think everybody benefits from counseling. You don't have to be crazy, or you don't have to,
Yeah.
lose it or anything like that. I think it is something that it's just an invitation for a better way of life, sometimes it's just the same old patterns that just need to go.
True.
And to just look at it with, nice polished glasses to say, look at your life now. So definitely helpful for all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, if someone watching this today is feeling scared, lost, or numb, what would you like to tell them?
I first and foremost want to validate what they're feeling. I think it's absolutely okay to feel lost, to feel numb, but to know you have a choice to feel better, right? And if you're watching this, know that help is available. There are people out there who can support you. You're not lonely. You don't have to do anything crazy to say that I'm cornered and I feel helpless and hopeless and worthless. There is a meaning and a purpose for your life. Seek the help and the support that you need to be able to bounce back. And also check out iamfine.in. Yeah, I'll absolutely be there to help and support you, because I think it's important to know that you're never alone. And that one negative thought is all that it takes, Simran, for you to spiral and hit rock bottom. So when you know that I am in control of that one negative thought and I can actually nip it, and I don't need to get succumbed by it, or I don't need to succumb to it, I think chances are that you are actually taking control and taking charge and saying, I'm going to fix this. Yeah, as of now it seems to be really kind of messing with my head, but I know I can figure this out. And just because you seek help does not make you weak, does not make you inferior, does not make you inadequate. In fact, it is only the strong who have the courage to put their hand up and say, I need help. So it's very important to look at it in that perspective and not just go with, decades of social belief that, yeah, you're weak and you're not capable. That's just the opposite.
Are there any habits that you could, ask them to follow on a day-to-day basis? Anything that will balance their mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are, 5 or 6 go-to things which everybody needs to follow, irrespective of, age or stage of life. I think first things first is, what time do you sleep? Sleep is very important. And I see you're also gleeing, so I'm sure there's something hidden there. Because we think that, and especially for the teenagers and the adolescent brain, that's the first thing that they nip. It's okay. I can do an all-nighter. I can pull it. You can pull it, but what happens to you the next day? You're sleep deprived. You're walking around like a zombie. You are irritated. You're frustrated. You have not hydrated, and you are a little all over the place, So what sleep does to us is what a holiday does to the body, right? It actually really, really helps nurture, fix, repair, restore all the damage that the body and the mind go through the whole day. So a good sleep, which is, 7 to 8 hours, is what is actually prescribed. So that's the first thing. Second is balanced, fresh meals. It's not about eating processed food. It's not about double cheese pizzas. You can binge once in a while, but it's really about eating what is fresh. I'm not talking of special imports and avocados and, Washington apples. You eat what is in your season, right? Fruits and vegetables which are locally grown, but fresh meals, to make sure that, your gut health is also Really, really good, because you are what you eat. Your energy is what you eat. The third thing, which is absolutely a non negotiable, is your exercise. So, whatever you like, so you can train for a marathon, you can play a sport, you can go cycling, you can, walk, whatever it is, but make sure that there is some form of exercise. Fourth is hydration. To make sure you are actually drinking about at least 2 liters of water, because our body is only made up of water, right? 70% is water. So to flush the toxins. So when you're angry, right, there is a lot of stress hormone that's released in the blood system, and it is there till the threat is there. After that, it is still in your body and it needs to exit your body. So only when you actually flush it out of your system with hydrating yourself, you're actually able to get it to exit. So make sure that you're hydrated. The fifth and the most important is your support systems, or your vitamin F, to have a lot of friends, to have interests, hobbies is the sixth one. But friends are very important, because different friends complement different needs, right? Like you have a intellectual gang where you'll only do like case study reviews. You have a gang which you'll only watch movies with. You have a gang with which you will just sit and binge and eat and whatever. So it's very important that all those needs are actually fulfilled. And the sixth last one is your hobbies and interests, because there are going to be times that all five might fail sometimes and you're just lonely, right? Now, I can be alone, but I don't feel lonely. Or I can be in a room full of 200 people and I can still be alone, So it's also how you feel. So it's very important to have some hobbies and interests to go to where you feel like, yeah, I'm okay. I can do this on my own. So painting, playing an instrument, learning a art form, dancing, crochet is my new favorite. Just to pick up something, because it's also developing new neural pathways in your brain. So it's very, very good for you. These are my six most valuable, precious ones, because without this, I think life can become difficult. And to be consistent. And I also struggle, Simran. I mean, one thing that is added into the routine and the whole cart topples, right? So consistency is a challenge, but I think somewhere to know what is the earliest that you can get back to it, as opposed to saying, oh God, I've missed 3 classes. Now let me just drop out. No, I have missed 3 classes. I'll go for the fourth, So can I start at where I am? Not to make it ideal, because life is anything but ideal. And every time you plan, there will be something that will challenge and, it'll cancel it.
Yeah.
So to just stay committed to it, it takes a little bit of an effort, but it's doable. And good habits never killed anybody, so, but it's difficult. And the ones who actually follow it. So, if you go out in the morning and you see people running and doing, I'm just like, what are these guys doing? Every day they wake up and they are here, right? They just are hooked onto it. So there is also the dopamine, there is the serotonin, there is, the oxytocin. All of this is something that actually gets them, to make sure. And if they are high on all these hormones, there is no need for you to spiral, or, chances are very less if you're able to take care of your mental health, So we always say, if your mental health is good, your physical health will also be good. But in our culture, the belief is, if my physical health is good, if I can deadlift 60 kilos, I'm rock solid. You can deadlift, but what about your first flow? So I think it's very important to first prioritize your mental health, and then also, side by side, be aware of your physical health and well-being, and do things that you absolutely enjoy. It's only this one lifetime that we know of, right?
Yeah.
You can do a past life regression, you can do lots of other things, spiritual readings and all of that. But in this lifetime, what is your purpose that you want to leave behind? And most importantly, I think, what is your role? If you're able to identify that, I think it's just
That's
brilliant. Yeah. There's just like no regret. Every day you're just excited to jump out of bed saying, I don't know who I'm going to meet today, and how's my day going to be. So, yeah, there's that.
So, and lastly, what does being human mean to you amongst the calm, the chaos, the noise, and the joy?
Wow, that's it's really like a thoughtful question. I think, like I said, do you enjoy your own quiet and solitude first and foremost? Because the noise, the joy, sometimes the chaos can also come from external factors. But are you able to be very peaceful with your own self? And if you learn that and arrive at that, I think chances are that you will always be grounded and stable in all of that noise, right? And I think that is something that a lot of people struggle with. A lot of clients also say that they are really okay and afloat as long as they are in groups. But, being alone or not in a relationship or not having that special person, or a family or, a significant other makes them actually feel very alone and lonely, right? So I think a lot of it is just about your own journey in terms of look back with a lot of joy everything that you have accomplished, and to see how far you have come. And I say it with a lot of humility, Simran. I am not who I was at 20, and if we had never moved to Chennai, I would probably be like a corporate honcho today, right? But I don't think I would have ever lived this journey, so like I say, you win some, you lose some, but at the end of the day, it's not a trade off. It is about what you really want, and at any given point in time there is free will. You can make a choice. You can choose to change your path, or you can come back with vigor and renewed energy to actually move forward, and carry your purpose. So identifying that purpose sometimes takes some time and a little bit of adipattifying, like figuring out different gigs and figuring out what is your true calling. But I think blessed are those people who really know what their this lifetime is for, you know. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but
It did.
that's what I feel about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simran. I actually really had a great time. I have done a few interviews, but I've never done something like this. So I was a little nervous. I was anxious, but I must tell you that you just put me at ease. And I think, I don't know, I just hope I've not spoken too much and that it most of it has been relevant. But absolute pleasure to be here and so thrilled to see you doing this. I wish you only the best.
Thank you so
Good luck
much.
and God bless you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. I think this conversation was a gentle reminder that healing does not have to be perfect or loud. And sometimes the best thing that you can do for yourself is show up for yourself quietly day after day. Thank you for sharing your honesty, for sharing your stories, and sharing your heart with us. And for the listeners, if there is something to take away, it is that it's okay to not be okay. It is okay to ask for help, and it is okay to take your own time to heal. So take care and stay well. Thank you for tuning into The Unsaid. Until next time.